All right, welcome everyone to the new Green Earth Live. I am Pedro Zim, and this is an unannounced session. This is a new format that we're testing, a new way of connecting with you. So we have an open today. Feel free to ask anything, share feedback, questions, anything you know about sustainability, carbon market, Green Earth, or our projects. Today I have Selvin Dauvstein, our CEO of Green Earth. How's it going today, Selvin?
Hi, yeah, it's going well, Pedro. Thanks for asking, and thanks for hosting me on this new pilot tryout. It's really exciting.
Yeah, super exciting. Thank you for sharing today and looking forward to the conversation we're going to have. So, well, before we begin, just a couple of housekeeping rules. Guys, if you have any questions, anything you'd like to share with us, you can chat on LinkedIn, on YouTube, or Facebook, or X, whatever, wherever you're watching us. Feel free to send your message, your questions, and we'll be happy to answer them. They could be from any topic regarding sustainability, regarding the carbon market, regarding our. We really want to keep this an open floor today to try out this new format and see if you guys like sharing this time with us. So, Selwyn, for us to begin conversation today, can you tell us a little about Green Earth, how this project started, and essentially what do we do and why do we exist?
Sure, yeah. So we set out to green our planet, and when we got started, we really didn't know exactly how we were going to do that, which what with what mechanism exactly, but we were sure it was needed a economic model because there's a lot of good charities and NGOs in the world, and they do great work. But when they run out of funding and when they need to do another funding round. They need to get other donations. And when the money dries up, the good work also dries up with the money shortage. So we knew it had to be an economic model. And that's when we found the carbon markets years back. And we said, this is the best instrument to restore nature on a large scale. And that's why we said the carbon credit is, of course, it stands for 1 ton of carbon removed or reduced from the atmosphere, but actually it stands for so much more. It stands for trees in the ground, nature restored, communities that are living close with nature that can be helped and can flourish and prosper. So what we do is we undertake, design, implement great projects, nature-based solutions all over the world that are good for nature, good for communities, and also the economic driver around it is the carbon credit, which are bought by businesses all over the world, small to large, and they help us do this great work.
Amazing. Thank you very much for sharing that. And not only you're our CEO, you're also the founder of the company. When did you found Green Earth and what made you start this?
Yeah, absolutely. So together with my wife, we were looking for something to add value. I have a background in the financial market. She's always worked in the cultural sector. And we said we should be able, with both our skill sets, to do so much more. And that's why we said, let's set ambitious goals and let's set out to achieve them. And when we have the right vehicle, which is basically the stock market listing that we acquired early on, we said this is the right vehicle, carbon credits are the right economic model. And then with those two together, the right teams and the right project, we will get the right clients and we will be able to actually execute and restore lots of acres, hectares of nature all around the world. So it's been a while back, and we've had other pilots. We've done some crowdfunding, we've done some biodiversity projects, but what we keep coming back to and what we're now really specialized in is agroforestry, large scale, and the carbon markets. That's where we have a great team of experts that work day in, day out to implement the projects and to give the best product to our customers, but also to serve the community and the environment best.
That sounds great. And mine is exactly about that. But before I ask my question, I just want to remind everyone that's watching, we have quite a crowd today, actually. If you have any questions, again, I do have questions I want to ask Selwyn, but this is an open conversation, an open floor. So don't be shy and feel free to ask any questions that you might want to ask. So you were talking a little bit about agroforestry and carbon, and the whole goal of green Earth is to make the earth greener. How does that relate with carbon credits, and what essentially we do in our day-to-day activities that actually helps us reach this goal greener?
Yeah, so there's I believe strongly in nature-based solutions. So there's sort of thing we as humans should and should not do to take better care of the planet. And there's different angles towards that. But our view, and that of the company and everyone that works with us, is that nature is the best way to do good for it. So more nature, the better. If we keep our forests standing up, if we keep our trees standing up, that's ultimately the best for our planet and therefore also for our people. So there's all sorts of great carbon reduction methodologies. There's all sorts of other sustainability products, projects, and new innovations going on. For example, solar panels are great, but what we do is we focus on nature. So what we're saying is when we restore the lands that we work on, when we restore the value, when we make sure that the land doesn't turn into sand but stays soil, healthy, rich soil, when the trees are not monoculture, invasive species taking over, making the land less productive, less biodiversity, less native species, let's stay away from that. Let's create a very diverse, mixed, natural forest, because then we have rich soil, we have happy communities living and working around it, and also all the living creatures are flourishing and prospering in that area. So that's our view, and that's why we work specifically in areas where you can see the desertification happening. The project in Kazakhstan is a good example of, if we don't do something there now, it will turn into an absolute desert, and the beautiful steppe of Kazakhstan will not be a beautiful steppe anymore. It will be an actual desert. In Kenya, in the northern parts, we're working around the Mount Kenya area, and every time I'm in Kenya and you drive up from Nairobi, you can see around you it will get more dry and dry and dry, and until you eventually get on the north side of the mountain, which is a very arid landscape. And it didn't used to be that way. 50 years ago, also that part was green. So you can see the desert is creeping up, and that's where you do something. You can do something about it by taking better care of existing nature, by making sure the farmers that we work with are better trained, better equipped to still get economic value from their land, but also to work hand in hand with nature. And if we do that step by step, farmer by farmer, acre by acre, we will end up with a lot of land in a better shape than it currently is.
That is an amazing purpose, I would say. And it begs the question for me, which it sounds almost way too good to be true, right? Because you're doing something that you enjoy, something that you feel that is good for the world. Um, how do we make money out of this? Because ever since I was in school, I thought about nature restoration, planting trees, and this kind of stuff as really really cool things and things that are important that we should do. But I've never heard of any job that pay me to plant trees other than being a farmer. So how
Mhm.
is the business model behind this restoration activities?
Absolutely, and that's why the carbon credits and the carbon credit mechanism is quite genius, and it's been around for a while. The first carbon credit got to life in 1993 already, following the Kyoto Protocol, and since then it's had its ups and downs. But lately, in the past decade, following the Paris Accord, there's been more and more focus on the carbon markets, and more companies and also people have realized, yes, this is actually a great mechanism where everybody benefits, because the buyer, the companies that want to become greener, that want to make up for the damage they do, are having the money to pay for restoration activities. So you have the companies that want to focus on their carbon footprint and do something about it and take responsibility. You have project developers like ourselves that say, okay, with that funding, with that money coming in, we can actually execute great projects. We're willing to take the risk. We're willing to do the hard work and implement these great nature-based solutions. And then you have the land, which is restored, brought up in value because of better care, more involvement of these nature-based solutions. The communities living in and around those areas will also benefit from the project. And ultimately, also the government thinks it's really interesting to see what we do, because as with any market, the government can play a role and take a sort of tax percentage from the activities in the area, because when there's more economic activity, the government can and will always tax that. So, but you see that governments worldwide are very interested in these carbon markets because it's a new market, and all of a sudden there's economic value which wasn't there before. So that's why the best example in Kazakhstan, we were able to secure a lease through local government of over 160,000 acres to restore land, because the government thinks it's very interesting that someone is willing to do something with that land. Local communities can benefit because there's more activity in the area. We're making sure the land, the soil gets enriched and doesn't turn into sand. And then all along that way, all these stakeholders benefit. So that's the economic business model for us as a project developer, is to focus on these projects and make sure they're high quality, high integrity, and they're very efficiently run. Because different than an NGO or a charity, we only have so much money to execute on. So we try to be as efficient as we can, and that's where the value comes from. And that's why we are very much focused on creating reliable long-term value every step of the way.
That's an amazing way of approaching this situation. And regarding the demand of carbon credits, I understand that companies which have these values within them, and then how important it is to compensate for the pollution that release on the world, essentially. But are we reliant only on those, or are is our business model reliant only on all companies on the world having a sudden access of understanding that they have to do the right thing, or are other companies also joining this kind of movement?
Definitely. There's more and more companies joining that movement, and depends on where you are in the world to really notice it in your everyday life. So I'm from the Netherlands. If I would go to a supermarket, I would see about 50% of all the products have a carbon neutral label. The commercial EV are very green, very focused, and the same goes for the UK, for Spain, for a lot of European countries. In Africa, the countries where we operate are also becoming more and more environmentally conscious, because they live and work on the land daily and are very aware that if we continue this way, it's not going in the right direction. In the US, it's very similar with the bigger corporates, less so with the SMEs, but still there's more and more up and coming movement where regenerative agriculture, taking better care of your farmers, has a very strong place in the economy. And you can notice that just last week at COP, there was another 1.1 billion investments into the carbon markets announced, with the lion's share focused on nature-based solutions. So the carbon markets, albeit not very tangible in the day-to-day life, it's a multi-billion-dollar market already every year. But to answer your question, there's so much more that we can do from operating these projects, because we do work hand in hand with the smallholder farmer in Uganda, and we are delivering him his seedlings, and we are training him on better coffee production. So we are very, very close to these last mile farmers that are, and therefore we're in the value chain. And what we're doing now is, by diversifying our revenue, is focusing also how can we play another role in this value chain. We're not just operating with a carbon credit project. That's of course objective number one, and that's what we always intend to do. And as these projects run 40 years, every carbon project is a 40-year commitment. Of course, we all get to each other a lot better. We're working so close on the value chain that there's other opportunities that will arise from that, and that's very exciting. It's 99% of our revenue currently comes from carbon credits, but I will see going forward that other opportunities arise. But at the moment, definitely carbon credits. The market is big enough. There's more projects joining, but that's only a good thing.
That's amazing to hear. And yeah, one of the things that we hear the most in the industry is that there aren't enough certified and high quality carbon credits for companies to buy. So there's certainly an opportunity there, right? We just had a comment from Emmanuel mentioning Kazakhstan carbon footprint, which is substantial, with 2022 fossil CO2 emission of nearly 246 million tons, which is 12.27 tons per capita. I think it just shows how important it is to such a project in Kazakhstan, not only to actually have to do something that is giving back to the environment, but I believe that also these kinds of projects are also bringing more visibility to sustainability. People will start to look at new opportunities because of it. And Selwyn, can you talk a little bit more about Kazakhstan? How did it came to be? What are the effects that we're expecting from it?
Absolutely, and it's exactly a project like that, and the reason mentioned that we're doing it, because when I go to Kazakhstan, you can just feel it the moment you step out the airplane. You can feel that it's a very up and coming market. Very Astana, its capital, is a very modern city. There's lots of development. There's lots of economic growth, and being in the middle of Europe, China, and on the northern border, Russia, there's a lot of economic activity ongoing. So is Kazakhstan going to stop that? Absolutely not. Should they? Absolutely not, because they're an up and coming, very much growing market. So there is, of course, a heavier carbon footprint and a more negative impact on the environment than maybe other economies. But the fact is, what else are they doing to take responsibility for the negative side? And then projects like this are very helpful, because Kazakhstan is such a huge country and such vast amount of land to restore their step, to focus on trees planted, trees maintained, soil improvement, water retention via a project like ours. Definitely a big portion of that footprint can be taken care of by just restoring a lot of nature. So if Kazakhstan government, and they're very effective and very well aware of this, when they focus on projects like these, then they can sort of make up for the damage. Yes, they will always be a growing economy with a big industry, but what else are they doing? They're actually restoring hundreds of thousands of acres, and I think that's exactly why the carbon markets work. And so, to tell you a little bit more about this project, what we're doing in our role, there's many good activities in the country, but we managed to register the first carbon project in the country. It's the Aral Sea, the greening of the Aral Sea, which is an area, it's one of the biggest environmental disasters of the century, actually. And if you zoom in on Google Maps, you can see that what used to be a sea, it's not a lake, but it's big enough to be called a sea, the Aral Sea, has really very much dried up. And therefore, the area around it is turning into a desert. It's a vast amount of land that is slowly and steadily becoming more and more dangerous because of the toxic sand storms. And what we're doing is we're planting a Saksau tree, which is known for its very deep roots. So it needs very little water. It can go very deep into the ground with its roots to find the groundwater. And then over the coming years, after it's being planted, it will restore the soil. And when there's better soil, other species will be able to survive as well in this very rough climate. So the plan is and we're planting the first 1,000 hectares early next year, and following that, we will plant another 10,000 hectares every year we will focus on Saxaul trees in the beginning, and then enrich the soil so the land can be more fertile and productive over the coming years.
That is super. This is one of the projects that really interests me a lot. I remember when I was a teenager and I was in high school and I saw for the first time the pictures of the ROC in a geography book, and I just believe what I was seeing, because it's definitely something. It's straight out of a science fiction movie, if you ask me, and it's really amazing that we're doing something about that. You were talking that we were already planting 1,000 hectares on the ROC, and we're planning on planting other 10,000 every year. That's a lot of hectares. What is the size, if we look at all the projects of Green Earth, what is the geographic scope of our active and pipeline projects today?
I remember very well 2 years ago when Thomas Donia, our technical director, said, Selwyn, look, we can see what we're doing from space. In Cameroon, we're restoring land and it's visible from space. If I look at the satellite images, I can see exactly what we're doing. And that's also the goal. We should be able to restore land on such a scale that it is visible in space. So we are working in Cameroon on an agroforestry setup. It has the potential to reach 45,000 hectares. There's 2 planting seasons every year. Depending on how things go, we always scale or we scale down. We learn from our lessons and then we improve. So there we're aiming for 40 to 45,000 hectares. In Uganda, we have a great project, also agroforestry, where we're focused on chimpanzee habitat restoration to make sure that chimps and rural farmers can live together in a good way. That entire chimp area is 27,000 hectares, and it's getting harder and harder for the chimps to have a good living habitat because also of the rapid growth in Uganda itself. Then in Kenya, we're working with smallholder farmers as well, all around the Mount Kenya area, which on its own is 36,000 hectares too. Now, the biggest efforts are in Kazakhstan because the Aral Sea, the area that we just spoke of, is more than 2 million hectares large. So it's a vast amount of dried up seabed, which can use a lot of regreening to make sure it doesn't turn desert. So those are our ambitions. That said, we have planted thousands of hectares already, and with every year that goes by, we always, as I said, with every planting season, we say, okay, what went wrong? How can we improve that next season? What went very well? Let's keep doing more of that in the next season. So, knowing what I all said just now, we are more than doubling next year everything that we've planted so far. And we're very much on schedule to restore a vast amount of land in the coming years.
That's a lot of impact, if you ask me. And the first half of 2025, from all of these new projects starting and all of this scaling, we can see that the revenue surged over at 641% year on year, which is kind of crazy. What are the main drivers behind that?
Yeah, so that's an important question because projects like these that we operate, they, as I said, we're for 40 years, but we're working with nature, and you cannot push nature. You can only do it so far, actually. So as much as we take care of the trees that go into the ground, they don't grow as fast. They never grow as fast as we would like. So it takes years before a seedling turns into a mature tree. And those first 4 or 5 years of planting, nurturing, taking care, when we can actually speak of a tree instead of a seedling, that moment it really starts capturing a lot of carbon, and therefore only after 4 or 5 years the majority of our projects start generating real interesting income. So before that, we're very reliant on our investor base. We're very happy to have a good investor base that says, okay, I understand what you're doing. We're happy to bridge that gap to year 4, to year 5, when you will generate the majority of the carbon credits. So to answer your question is that's exactly our revenue growth reflects exactly the natural growth of a tree. Because when we started our first project about 5 years ago, it starts with a design and then implementation follows. But it takes years for trees to go into the ground and actually generate the carbon credits. So I always point shareholders and in press releases, I always point investors towards our current pipeline and what's already in the ground. Because if we just stop all production today, if we stop reducing, if we stop restoring nature today, we still have so many hectares planted, so many cook stoves distributed, that they will generate carbon credits for the next decades to come. And you can see that in our underlying revenue.
That is very interesting. And a question that I have about that, and especially is geared toward more for our investors, is you mentioned that our project cycles are off because that's how long the cycle of nature happens, which is very usual, especially on these days in the world. We're expecting things to be faster and happening faster. But at the same time, I believe that from my view, my perspective is that this huge cycles also bring some kind of stability for the asset. Uh, I know that even before DGB, even before Green Earth, you are an investor, you understand the financial market, and now this is more of Pedro, the curious one. How does this asset compare when it comes to stability to other types of assets and other types of in companies which have much shorter cycles? I mean, if you talk about 40 years in a technology company, that there are Google is not 40 years old.
I know exactly, and that's well, forestry in general takes a long breath, as we say in the Netherlands, as an investment category, because it will take time before it develops. There's a lot of great sustainable timber companies, but they have a 20-year life cycle, and the carbon markets and the carbon projects, they will take 5 years to really get started. Every project does. And then it's at its peak around year 11, and it will stay at its peak for the next decades to follow. So it becomes quite interesting. And the projects that were started 10 years ago have been very profitable for all stakeholders involved. But therefore, also, it's quite interesting that there's this delay, and there's such a need at the moment from companies all over the world to for these carbon credits, because everybody wants to restore nature and everybody wants to do good, but there's only so many carbon credits available. So there's this delay of 4 or 5 years as well in the production, which is quite interesting, because then for us, we can the project we started 5 years ago will come to fruition in the next moment. So that's it's interesting, and but it takes a certain type of investor and buyer to fully understand that, because indeed, tech, AI, it goes a lot faster.
Yeah, it goes a lot faster. It goes way faster as well. But maybe I don't know.
Exactly.
But
Yeah, and it's what I hear a lot is that currently there's a few trends in the world, and we have strong focus on tech and AI, which nobody fully understands, and there will be one or two winners, but a lot of startups at the moment trying to do the same thing will eventually die out. I mean, AI has changed the world, will change the world, but how do you really pick the winner? Then there's strong focus, unfortunately, on the defense industry, especially in Europe, which is something I personally don't believe in, and I don't see that as a good investment category, because why should you promote war? And then there's sustainability, and that's really, for me, the only thing that's actually left to invest in a better planet. And every company that wants to contribute to that should very much be promoted and rewarded and invested in.
100% agree. I might be a little bit biased since I work for a sustainability company, but I 100% agree with that. I definitely think that it's a little bit better to invest in planting trees rather than producing weapons with your money. But hey, that's just me. So, but again, with this long cycles and all the difference of the market, it might be challenging to manage expectations expectations and to balance ecological impact with restoration, with biodiversity, and also show financial return for the investors. How does Green Earth balance that?
Well, that's a good question because there's a few different stakeholders involved for every carbon project and for us as a company. So we have the buyer of the carbon credit, we have our investors that help us bridge the gap, and we have the communities and the land and the projects. So our view is as long as we keep the project on big number one, and actually also number two and number three, that's our biggest focus. As long as we focus on producing the highest quality carbon credits, which means restoring nature in the best possible way, train the farmer in the best possible way, therefore generating a high quality carbon credit, that's what will attract the best buyers, and then we will be able to secure investments a lot easier. So our focus is, and the balance is, as long as we focus on doing our job the best we can, executing these projects the best we can, implementing the best type of solutions, not taking any shortcuts, that will work itself through all the aspects that are part of running a company. So we put our product on number one, and that's restoring nature, and everything else follows. And it has proven to be so.
That's amazing to hear. Well, we've been talking for quite a while already. We've got some interesting questions and comments from the crowd. Before we go, Selwyn, thoughts, comments that you'd like to leave with our audience today?
Sure. Yeah. So this is as you introduced, it's very much a spontaneous action to go live on all our platforms. I know we have all sorts of people following us. Maybe the farmers in Kenya, people for looking for a job in Kazakhstan, investors in the Netherlands and US, governments. We have all sorts of followers on our social media. So we said let's try this out, see who is following us. And if you're watching this, do send us a message on WhatsApp or email, or reach out to Pedro or myself and say, well, for next time, this was very interesting, but I'd like to see more focus on specific topics. So we'll definitely do this more often if you're up for it, Pedro, and we'll just we can answer all questions, but also focus on specific items if certain people say, well, that's what you should focus on. Explain a carbon credit better. What are you exactly doing in Cameroon? All of that we can zoom in, but we're open for all recommendations and comments around this format.
Exactly. Second, everything that someone said. Any suggestions, specific questions, topics you'd like us to explore? This is an open floor, and the idea of these talks is really to make just to create an informal conversation that everyone can join, talk about, get informed, learn something new, or maybe just spend a couple of minutes talking about nature, which is not a bad thing to do with your day. But for everyone that today, thank you so much for joining. We hope that this was of value to you. Selwyn, thank you very much for your time and for efforts with Green Earth. I'm pretty sure that Mother Earth is quite grateful for what we're doing. And yep, for everyone else, stay in touch. We should be live soon.
All right. Thanks. All right.